Some of you may have listened to our podcast, which we created earlier this year, over a number of weeks. If not, it's still available on all major podcast platforms. And Spotify, which is quite cool if you say to your parents, yeah, I'm on Spotify. This is my album cover or something. They don't understand. But it was a real labour of love, actually, creating this podcast series. And we did it as a series on purpose, just to test the water. Had some great conversations with many of you in the room, actually. And we've had some fantastic feedback as a platform, as a piece of content that people can consume and listen to in the car, at the gym, when they get ready, all of that kind of stuff. And it's no surprise to me, therefore, that podcasts and audio marketing in general is becoming really big. And as I said at the beginning, it's not actually that new. But it seems to have had a bit of a resurgence. So it's been great to actually get podcast websites involved as our headline sponsor, because they've been really helpful in helping us set up the podcast and get that traffic, and to help people, again, remove barriers to buying a ticket. So let me introduce you to our next speaker, who's from podcast websites, actually. It's Hannah McCreesh. She's the head of content and partnerships at podcast websites, and she's actually an established lifestyle blogger as well. So go and follow her on Instagram. So she understands the process of creating content, and now obviously is applying it from an audio perspective. So please welcome to the stage Hannah McCreesh.
Okay, excellent. Hi, everyone. I'm Hannah, and this is my first time speaking at a conference, which means two things. A, you have to be really nice to me, and B, if I fall over in these shoes, no one is to put it on social media, which we won't be able to do anyway because of the Wi-Fi, but... Sorry, Paul. So, as Paul said, I am the head of content at podcast websites, and I'm here to you today to talk about building profitable influence using podcasting and audio marketing. I've also hair catfished you, I'm sorry. I need a new professional headshot. So this is me at work. I go to a lot of festivals in my spare time, and I happen to get this quite ridiculous coat delivered to the office. So naturally I put it on and waited for my bosses to notice. And Paul begged me to wear it today, but sadly I said, no, I'm going to be a human rainbow instead. I'm going to be a bit more professional. But this is a little bit about what we do, but all you really need to know is that we're an all-in-one hosting solution for your podcast. So I want to delve a little bit into why your current marketing efforts might not be working so well. And it's probably because you're still marketing like these guys. My first graduate job out of university was for a local PR agency. And as you often do with agencies, we were pitching for some new work in Leeds. So we'd put loads of time and effort into this work up front for obviously no money. It had taken executives' time, it had taken directors' time, and we got our glad rags on and got on the train to Leeds. On the approach to the business's office, we saw two other agencies just on their way out. So by this time, we already knew that the people we were pitching to were probably a bit tired, probably a bit bored, probably had heard the same or similar things, but most importantly, had probably already decided who they were going to go for. Sometimes, in these situations, you can have a similar pitch, a similar product, a similar price, a similar website. So how do you set yourself apart? How do you let those people in that room feel as if they already know you, they already like you, and they already trust you? Sorry for the marketing jargon. You can do that through podcasting. So put your hands up if you know who this beautiful man is. A lot of people. This was, up until recently, my celebrity husband choice, but he went off and married someone else. So I want you to put your hands up if you watched Game of Thrones when it was scheduled and on TV. Okay, you saddos. Now, I want you to put your hands up if you binge watched Game of Thrones on Amazon Prime or Netflix or any other streaming device. Okay, me too, guilty. That was a whole weekend gone. Now, I want you to put your hand up if you've ever got an Uber or if you got an Uber to the conference this morning. Woo, that's a lot of Ubers. And put your hands up if you have ever ordered a takeaway from Just Eat. Okay, no judgment here. So my point here is this. It's not to judge you on how many takeaways or Ubers you get. is to show that we live in an on-demand economy where we are used to having what we want when we want it. And this extends to the media we consume. When I go back to my parents' house in, I was going to say Leicestershire, but I'm actually near there, so I feel like people here might know where it is. It's near Melton Mowbray. Anyone? Melton Mowbray? Yeah. So they live in the middle of nowhere. There's about 1 bar of signal. The Wi-Fi's rubbish. They might as well sell it as a medieval experience because the house is 400 years old. And there's no Ubers anywhere. There's no delivery. I don't think my dad knows what an Uber is. And to come from living in the middle of a city where I'm so used to having all these things on my doorstep to somewhere like that is a real culture shock because we are so used to this. Now, you knew Jon Snow, but I'm interested to see if anyone knows who this guy is. Ooh, a few of you, okay. So this is a screenshot from a TV program on Amazon Prime called Law, and it actually started out live as a podcast. The best podcasts and the most successful podcasts are ones that bridge the gap between adding value and entertaining people. Has anyone in this room heard of the podcast Serial? Wow, okay, more than I would have thought. Serial is incredibly successful. It's the most successful true crime podcast of all time, and it's been downloaded over 250 million times. So people clearly want to be entertained. The way we consume everything is changing. And even though an on-demand economy is often cited as being an enemy, as making humans lose their jobs, I'm here to show you why it can actually be your friend. We no longer just listen to radio shows or audiobooks. Podcasting is a huge, thriving industry, and we are at such an exciting time in the UK because we are just about to hit the same boom that America has already seen. Now, I want to delve into a little bit about if you want to be a podcaster or an audio influencer. So I'm going to talk about a podcaster. This is marketing suit douche, stock image marketing guy. Let's call him Steve. Sorry if there's any Steves in the audience. So this guy already he does all the social media. He's got a YouTube channel. He tweets every now and then. He thought, you know what? I'm going to start a podcast. It sounds trendy and cool. And he's going to call it something really boring like the Marketing Podcast. And in this podcast, he's going to do infrequent episodes about SWOT analysis and other boring stuff. It's not entertaining. People aren't going to want to listen to it. But speaking of people who are entertaining, Andrew and Pete, woo! Give it up for those guys. So I first heard about Andrew and Pete actually through their podcast, The Andrew and Pete Show. It was not long after I'd started at podcast websites, and my boss, Mark Asquith, was a guest on their show. Now, when you think of a content marketing podcast, you might think, again, something just typical content marketing-y, like how to have a killer blog schedule, get better email open rates. But these guys do literally anything but. They get industry experts from around the world on their show, and they make them basically do ridiculous things that are extremely entertaining to listen to. So there's things like the slow fire round. They get people to put their mouths to the water, and they have to say a sentence without laughing. So it's not related, but it adds value and is incredibly entertaining. And that's why these guys are audio influencers in their niche. We listen to this, and we understand that they can actually do what they say they can do. Anyone could have a fancy website and put some tweets out and put themselves up for awards, but there's no more intimate a way to communicate with people than speaking to them in their ears. The best podcasts bridge that gap between entertainment, value, and then there's us guys in the middle just getting all this good stuff. Now, I want to talk about our co-founder, John Lee Dumas. Has anyone heard of Entrepreneurs on Fire, the podcast? Woo, again. You guys are impressing me. So John has an incredibly successful podcast called Entrepreneurs on Fire. And the reason John is so successful is because of two things. Firstly, he got in early. He got into the podcasting space doing a 7-day-a-week podcast when no one at that time was doing that. It was incredulous to people. They were thinking, why would you do a 7-day-a-week podcast? That is a lot of work. I've got things to do. But that's why he's done so well, because people wanted something that they could listen to every day. And he did amazing interviews with industry experts from around the world. He added value, but because of John and who John is, he's entertaining as well. So the second reason that John has done so well is because he simply is John, and he really embodies that whole on-fire persona. That's who he is. Since then, everyone has seen this recipe for success, and they thought, I want to be on fire too. Doesn't matter what industry, I'm going to be on fire. I'm going to do the same thing that John did. And there's so many business entrepreneurial podcasts who interview the same people. They have the same format. And guess what? It doesn't work. So now I want to talk about one of our podcast website's members. This is Carmen Capriotto. Excellent name. I'm very jealous. And he has an automotive niche podcast called Remarkable Results Radio. So it's very industry specific. He started his podcast a couple of years ago now. And I want to ask you guys, how much money do you think Carm makes a year in podcast sponsorships alone? Anyone, take a guess. I'm going to pick on you in the onesie. How many? 30 grand, okay. Anyone else? Just shout a number, shout at me. 100 grand, 200 grand. Oh my God, you guys are generous. $150,000 a year in podcast sponsorships alone. I said dollars and not pounds, yes. Now, how many downloads in a month after he releases the episode do you think he gets? Because that's the metric that sponsors look at. Take a guess. Yellow jumper lady. Yeah. 100,000. Okay, shout at me. 200? A million? Okay, I've heard a few thousands. 368 downloads a month. And he makes that much money. And I'll tell you why that is. Audio influence. Carm is the audio influencer in his niche. If he just had a podcast about cars, why would any sponsor go to him over the many other car podcasts that there are out there? Because it's so niche, that's why he does well. Because otherwise, I always use this analogy. If you decided, I love health and fitness and I'm going to start a fitness podcast, why would My Protein go to you when they think about sponsoring podcasts compared to someone who's got JLD levels of downloads? They just wouldn't, unless you managed to scale things up. However, if you decided you wanted to start a fitness podcast that was aimed specifically at mums who've just given birth and are getting back into fitness, suddenly a whole new world of potential sponsors opens itself up to you, whose company values and their audience aligns well with the people that you are speaking to. I worked really hard on this meme. Took me a good 15 minutes. My point here is this. Podcasting is no longer just geeks in their bedroom talking about Lost. It's a huge, thriving industry. And as I mentioned earlier, you are in no better position to start podcasting in the UK now than you ever will be. You have a golden ticket. Yes, me and Emma both got golden tickets in there. You have a golden ticket of opportunity right now. Because if John had started his podcast 4 years later, he would be another fish in this massive pond of things that are on fire. But if you start now, you can establish yourself as the person to go to in whatever niche you happen to be in. So podcasting in America is huge. I'm going to pick on Chris. Chris, how big is podcasting in the US? It's massive. Every man and his dog has a podcast over there. It's crazy. A recent study by an advertising agency called Midroll in America saw that of 168,000 people they surveyed who listen to podcasts, 61% of those have bought something as a result of listening to that podcast, to an advertisement. 61%. That's ridiculous. So going back to the beginning where I spoke about the scenario where I've gone and pitched for work and we didn't get the work. How could we have won that pitch? If we had gone into that pitch and we were Andrew and Pete and we had an amazingly successful podcast and they already felt like they knew us, they knew that we could do what we said we could do you think we would have been in a better position against those other agencies who have similar pricing, a similar website, similar client lists, similar awards? What do you guys think? Yes is the right answer. You need to become the only viable option in your niche, the only person that these people would think to go to, both for podcast sponsorships and for, I've completely lost my trail, sorry. You need to be the personal expert, the one-to-one voice. You need to help people to live the lives that they want to live and add value, but again, be entertaining. We're back to this diagram that I made. So how are you going to do this on a practical level? The difference between podcasters and audio influencers is that podcasters are people who decide one day flippantly that they're going to start a podcast. They do it infrequently. They don't put the proper effort in. They don't buy a proper microphone. And though it's great that podcasting is so accessible in that you can do it on your phone, you can do it anywhere, the barriers of entry are super low, if you want to make a real thing of it, you need to look like you take it seriously. You need to not talk about yourself. Nobody cares about you. Nobody cares about your business. They don't care about the awards you've done. You need to create content that helps people to live the lives that they want to live. You need to have a really clear call to action. And it can't be a different one. At the end of every podcast episode, you have to direct people to exactly the same place. You need to be really clear and really explicit in this. Say what you want them to do next. Whether that's sign up for your ebook or go and leave a review on Apple Podcasts, you need to be really clear. So a great example of this is, again, my boss, who definitely didn't make me put this in here. So Mark has an amazing 5-day-a-week podcast called The 7-Minute Mentor. And at the end of every single one of those episodes, the call to action is, come and join me on my free coaching session on a Friday. Similarly, Andrew and Pete, again, did you guys do this presentation or did I? So through Andrew and Pete's podcast, I learned about their membership group, Atomic, which helps content marketers to be better at their jobs and to think bigger and to do really cool stuff. So if I'd never listened to their podcast, I never would have learned more about them or all the other things that they do and all the other things that they do that make them money. So podcast websites exist to make successful audio influencers. Without them, we aren't a business simply. And to do that, you have to be the Andrew and Pete's, you have to add value, and you have to be entertaining. And that is how you will build profitable influence and become the only viable option when people think about podcast sponsorships. Don't just be an SEO on fire, a marketer's on fire, a content marketing on fire. We don't need any more things on fire. You need to be yourself, be original, be unique. And your personality really is the biggest, best thing for you here. So if you're feeling a little bit overwhelmed, I have no idea how to start this, but I want to. We have an amazing resource called the Podcast Success Academy, which is a skills-based academy that's full of workshops and tutorials and resources that give people all the skills that they don't necessarily think they need to be a successful podcaster. And it's absolutely free. I had another point, and I can't remember what it is. Yes, I remember. If you're listening to this and you're thinking, I want to start a podcast, this really feels like the right medium for me, what I implore you to do is please go away from here and schedule some time out in your diaries to actually action it. Oh, that's a mouthful. Don't just think, oh, it sounds nice, because in 6 months down the line, your competitors will be doing what you've been thinking of doing, and they would have gotten early, and they would have got that spot that you could have had. If you have any questions, you can email me, hannah@podcastwebsites.com, or feel free to grab me after this talk, and I'll be so, so happy to help you. But thank you guys very much. That's me done.